The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the Wickenburg, Arizona depot, and Adelaide Norton pressed her gloved hand against the bruises circling her wrist, hidden beneath cream-colored lace that had seen better days. She stepped down into the afternoon sun of June 1882, squinting at the dusty street lined with weathered buildings that seemed to shimmer in the heat. Her traveling trunk followed behind her, carried by a driver who barely looked her way, and Adelaide was grateful for his indifference. She had grown accustomed to avoiding eyes that asked too many questions. The correspondence with Fletcher Walsh had been brief, practical, and blessedly free of sentiment. He needed a wife. She needed somewhere to disappear. The arrangement suited them both, or so she hoped as she scanned the handful of men waiting near the depot. Her fingers trembled slightly as she smoothed the front of her dove-gray traveling dress, careful not to press too hard against the bruises that dotted her ribcage like a map of violence she refused to remember. A tall man separated himself from the shadow of the general store's overhang, and Adelaide knew immediately that he was Fletcher Walsh. He moved with the unhurried confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. His hat sat low on his brow, shading eyes that she could not quite make out until he stopped directly in front of her and tipped the brim upward. "Miss Norton," he said, and his voice was like gravel smoothed by water, rough but not unkind. "Fletcher Walsh. I hope your journey was not too difficult." Adelaide opened her mouth to respond with the practiced pleasantries she had prepared, but the words caught in her throat when she saw his face. A scar ran from his left temple down to his jaw, puckered and white against sun-bronzed skin. His nose had been broken at least once, maybe twice, and healed crooked. But his eyes, pale blue like a winter sky, held a gentleness that made her chest tighten with an emotion she could not name. "The journey was long," she finally managed, "but I am here now." Fletcher nodded once, as if this simple statement contained all the information he required. He picked up her trunk with one hand, muscles flexing beneath his work shirt, and gestured toward a wagon hitched to 2 sturdy horses. "My ranch is about 5 miles west of town. I figured we could head to the church first if you're ready. Reverend Patterson is expecting us." Adelaide's heart hammered against her ribs. She had known this was the arrangement, but the reality of it struck her like a physical blow. She would marry this stranger within the hour, bind herself to him legally and completely, and hope that the desperation that had driven her across half the country would not prove to be a terrible mistake. "I am ready," she said, because what other choice did she have? The church was a modest structure at the edge of town, whitewashed wood that gleamed almost painfully bright in the Arizona sun. Reverend Patterson was a thin man with kind eyes and a nervous habit of adjusting his spectacles. He performed the ceremony with 2 witnesses pulled in from the street, a shopkeeper and his wife who looked at Adelaide with open curiosity that made her want to sink through the floorboards. Fletcher's hand was warm and calloused when he took hers to slide the simple gold band onto her finger. His touch was careful, almost tentative, and Adelaide realized with a start that he was nervous too. The revelation made him seem more human, less like the imposing figure he had appeared at the depot. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Patterson said, and Adelaide's breath caught. Fletcher leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. When his lips brushed against hers, feather light and brief, Adelaide tasted dust and coffee and something else, something that might have been hope. He pulled back almost immediately, his eyes searching her face for something she did not know how to give him yet. The wagon ride to Fletcher's ranch was quiet, except for the creak of wheels and the steady clip of hooves. Adelaide kept her hands folded in her lap, acutely aware of the man beside her. He did not press her with questions or attempts at conversation, and she was grateful for the silence. It gave her time to study the landscape rolling past, all sage and scrub and distant mountains that rose like sentinels against the cloudless sky. The ranch itself was more substantial than Adelaide had expected. A sturdy house stood in a small clearing, flanked by a barn and several outbuildings. Horses grazed in a corral, their tails swishing lazily at flies. Everything spoke of a man who took pride in his work, who built things to last. Fletcher helped her down from the wagon, his hands spanning her waist, and Adelaide flinched before she could stop herself. His hands dropped away immediately, and she saw a flicker of something cross his face before his expression smoothed into careful neutrality. "I will show you the house," he said, stepping back to give her space. The interior was clean but sparse, furnished with handmade pieces that were functional rather than decorative. Fletcher carried her trunk into a bedroom that smelled of cedar and sunshine. A large bed dominated the space, covered with a quilt in shades of blue and green. "This is the main bedroom," Fletcher said, setting her trunk at the foot of the bed. "There is another room down the hall. Smaller, but it has a good window. You can choose where you would like to sleep." Adelaide stared at him, surprised. Most men would have simply assumed their marital rights, especially after a marriage as hastily arranged as theirs. "You are giving me a choice?" Fletcher met her eyes steadily. "I figure we are both strangers here, Mrs. Walsh. No need to rush into things we are not ready for. We have got time to figure out how this will work between us." Something in Adelaide's chest loosened, a knot she had not realized she was carrying. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded and left her alone in the room, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Adelaide sat on the edge of the bed and let out a shaky breath. Her fingers found the bruises on her wrist again, pressing gently against the yellowing marks. 3 weeks since she had fled Boston in the dead of night, 3 weeks since she had answered Fletcher Walsh's advertisement in the newspaper, 3 weeks since she had decided that anything, even marriage to a stranger in the Arizona territory, was better than staying where she was. She unpacked slowly, hanging her few dresses in the wardrobe and placing her meager possessions on the dresser. A hairbrush with a cracked handle, a small photograph of her parents, both dead now for 5 years, a book of poetry that had been her mother's. Everything she owned in the world fit into a single trunk, and Adelaide tried not to think too hard about what that said about her life. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Fletcher in the kitchen, stoking the fire in the stove. He looked up at her entrance, and she saw him take in her face with a quick, assessing glance that made her wonder what he saw there. "I was going to make some coffee and heat up the stew from yesterday," he said. Are you hungry?" Adelaide realized that she was, despite the anxiety that had been her constant companion for weeks. "Yes, thank you." They ate at a simple wooden table, the silence between them more comfortable now than it had been in the wagon. Fletcher did not ask her questions about her past or her reasons for answering his advertisement, and Adelaide found herself relaxing incrementally with each passing minute. The stew was good, hearty, and well-seasoned, and she said so. "I learned to cook out of necessity," Fletcher said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Bachelor life does not leave much room for bad food if you want to keep your strength up." "How long have you been alone here?" Adelaide asked, then immediately worried that the question was too personal. But Fletcher did not seem to mind. 5 years. I bought this land when I was 23 and built everything you see here with my own hands and the help of a few hired men. It is not much, but it is mine." There was pride in his voice, the kind that came from honest work and honest living. Adelaide felt a pang of something that might have been envy. She could not remember the last time she had felt proud of anything about her life. "It is a good place," she said softly. "You should be proud." Fletcher's eyes met hers across the table, and Adelaide saw surprise there, as if he had not expected her to understand. "Thank you," he said. "I hope you will come to think of it as your home too." That night, Adelaide chose the smaller bedroom down the hall. She changed into her nightgown and brushed out her dark hair, wincing when her fingers caught on a tender spot on her scalp that she had nearly forgotten about. The bruise there had faded to a dull green, hidden beneath her hair where no one could see it. She lay in bed and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling around her. Somewhere outside, a horse whinnied. The wind rattled the window in its frame. And down the hall, she heard the quiet sounds of Fletcher preparing for bed, the creak of floorboards under his weight. Adelaide pulled the covers up to her chin and stared at the ceiling. She had done it. She had escaped, had put 2,000 miles between herself and the man who had given her these bruises, had given herself a chance at something different. Whether that something would be better remained to be seen, but at least it was different. And for now, that was enough. The days fell into a rhythm that surprised Adelaide with its ease. Fletcher left early each morning to work the ranch, tending to his horses and the cattle he kept in the pastures beyond the house. Adelaide took over the household tasks, cooking and cleaning and mending, finding a strange peace in the simple domesticity of it all. Fletcher never asked her to explain the bruises that occasionally peeked out from beneath her sleeves or the way she sometimes flinched at sudden movements. He simply gave her space, treated her with a careful courtesy that made her want to weep with relief. 3 weeks after her arrivals, Adelaide was in the kitchen kneading bread dough when Fletcher came in earlier than usual. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, revealing a glimpse of tanned skin beneath, and there was dirt smudged across his cheek. "One of the fence posts broke," he explained, moving to the basin to wash his hands. "Had to wrestle a stubborn heifer back into the pasture before she decided to go exploring." Adelaide found herself smiling despite herself. "Did you win?" Fletcher grinned, and the expression transformed his face, softening the hard lines and making him look younger. "Eventually, though I think she got in a few good kicks just to make a point." He pulled his torn shirt over his head, clearly intending to find a fresh one, and Adelaide's hands stilled in the dough. His back was a map of scars, old ones that had long since healed into white lines against his skin. There were too many to count, crisscrossing and overlapping in a pattern that spoke of violence and pain. Fletcher must have sensed her staring because he turned, his shirt clutched in one hand. Their eyes met, and Adelaide saw the moment he realized what she had seen. She waited for him to make an excuse, to offer an explanation or demand that she not ask questions. Instead, he simply said, "I will get a clean shirt," and walked past her toward the bedroom. Adelaide stood frozen for a long moment, her hands buried in bread dough, her mind racing. He had not asked her about her marks. She would not ask him about his. The silent agreement settled between them like a pact, unspoken but understood. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Adelaide found herself speaking without planning to. "I was afraid when I came here," she said quietly, "afraid of what kind of man you might be." Fletcher was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "And now?" "Now I think I'm less afraid," Adelaide admitted. "You are kind, Fletcher, kinder than I expected." He turned to look at her, and in the fading light, his eyes were impossibly blue. "You do not owe me anything, Adelaide. I want you to know that. Whatever brought you here, whatever you are running from, you are safe now. I will not let anyone hurt you." The fierceness in his voice made Adelaide's throat tight. She wanted to tell him everything, wanted to pour out the whole sordid story of Edmund Pierce and his charming smile that hid a cruel temper, of the way he had courted her after her parents died, and she was alone and vulnerable. She wanted to explain how she had thought marriage to him would solve her problems, how she had not realized until their wedding night that she had made a terrible mistake. She wanted to describe the months of escalating violence, the careful way Edmund had hidden her bruises beneath high-neck dresses and long sleeves, the isolation that had made her feel like she was drowning. But the words would not come. So instead, she reached out and placed her hand over Fletcher's where it rested on the porch railing. His fingers were warm and rough beneath hers, and he turned his hand over to lace their fingers together. They sat like that until full dark fell and the stars emerged overhead, countless and bright in the clear desert sky. The following Sunday, Fletcher asked if Adelaide would like to accompany him to town for church services. She had been avoiding Wickenburg, reluctant to face the curious stares and whispered questions that inevitably followed the arrival of a mail-order bride. But something in Fletcher's hopeful expression made her agree. The church was fuller than it had been for their wedding. Families packed into the pews in their Sunday best. Adelaide felt the weight of dozens of eyes on her as she walked down the aisle beside Fletcher. his hand resting protectively at the small of her back. They found seats near the middle, and Adelaide tried to focus on Reverend Patterson's sermon rather than the whispers that seemed to follow them like shadows. After the service, a woman with gray-streaked blonde hair and a warm smile approached them. "Fletcher Walsh, you are a hard man to catch. I have been meaning to come by and meet your new bride, but the children have been keeping me busy." Fletcher's face softened with genuine affection. "Mrs. Harriet Turner, this is my wife, Adelaide. Adelaide. Mrs. Turner runs the school here in town. She taught me to read when I was a boy." Harriet waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, you would have figured it out eventually. You were always too stubborn to let anything defeat you." She turned to Adelaide with sharp, assessing eyes that seemed to see too much. "It is lovely to meet you, dear. I hope you will come to Our Lady's tea on Thursday afternoons. We meet at the church, and it is a good way to get to know the other women in town." Adelaide hesitated, but Fletcher gave her an encouraging nod. "I would like that," she said. "Thank you." As they walked back to the wagon, Adelaide felt lighter somehow, as if Harriet's simple invitation had made her feel more anchored to this place. Fletcher helped her up onto the seat, his hand steady at her waist, and she did not flinch this time. "Mrs. Turner is a good woman," Fletcher said as he guided the horses out of town. "She helped me a lot when I was young. My father died when I was 10, and my mother followed 2 years later. Mrs. Turner made sure I did not fall through the cracks." Adelaide looked at him with new understanding. "Is that how you got the ranch? After they died?" Fletcher shook his head. "No, my parents were dirt poor. We did not own anything but the clothes on our backs. I worked for a rancher named Thomas Winters from the time I was 12 until I was 23. He taught me everything about horses and cattle and how to run a ranch properly. When he died, he left me enough money to buy this land and get started. Said I had earned it." "He sounds like he was a good man," Adelaide said softly. "The best I ever knew," Fletcher agreed. "He gave me a chance when no one else would have." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the wagon rocking gently over the rutted road. Adelaide found herself watching Fletcher's profile, the strong line of his jaw, and the way the sun caught in his dark hair where it curled slightly at the nape of his neck. He was handsome in a rough, weathered way, but more than that, he was steady, reliable, safe. The thought should have comforted her, but instead it made her chest ache with a complicated tangle of emotions she could not quite name. Thursday afternoon found Adelaide dressed in her best day dress, a soft blue cotton with white lace at the collar and cuffs. The lace covered the last fading traces of finger-shaped bruises on her wrists, and she was grateful for it. Fletcher drove her into town, promising to return in 2 hours to collect her. The church's back room was crowded with women of all ages, from young mothers with babies on their hips to elderly grandmothers with silver hair and gentle smiles. Harriet Turner greeted Adelaide with a warm hug and introduced her around the room with the efficiency of a general marshalling troops. "This is Adelaide Walsh, Fletcher's bride. Adelaide, this is Mary Henderson, Sarah Zimmerman, Ruth Carson, and Elizabeth Yates. Oh, and over there with the baby is Anna Brennan." The names blurred together, but the faces were kind, and Adelaide found herself relaxing as the women drew her into their conversation. They talked about their children, their husbands, the summer heat, and the lack of rain. No one asked Adelaide prying questions about her past or why she had come to Arizona as a mail-order bride. It was not until the tea was winding down that Harriet pulled Adelaide aside, her expression more serious. "How are you settling in at the ranch, dear? Fletcher treating you well?" "Yes," Adelaide said, and she was surprised to realize how much she meant it. "He is very kind." Harriet studied her for a long moment, and Adelaide had the uncomfortable feeling that the older woman could see right through her carefully constructed facade. "Fletcher is one of the good ones," Harriet said quietly. "He has been through things that would have broken a lesser man, but he came out of it with his heart intact. You are lucky to have found each other." Adelaide wanted to ask what Harriet meant about Fletcher being through things, but the older woman had already moved away to help clean up the tea things. Adelaide helped as well, washing cups and putting away chairs, feeling more a part of something than she had in years. Fletcher was waiting outside when she emerged, leaning against the wagon with his hat pulled low against the afternoon sun. He straightened when he saw her, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "How was it?" he asked. "Good," Adelaide said, and she meant it. "Mrs. Turner invited me to come every week." "I am glad," Fletcher said simply, and helped her up into the wagon. As they drove home, Adelaide found herself telling him about the women she had met, the conversations they had shared. Fletcher listened attentively, occasionally asking questions or making comments that showed he was genuinely interested. It struck Adelaide that this was what marriage was supposed to be, this easy sharing of daily life, this simple companionship. That night, Adelaide lay in her small bedroom and listened to the sounds of the ranch. She had been at Fletcher's home for nearly a month now, and the terror that had driven her across the country was beginning to fade, replaced by something tentative and fragile that might have been peace. The nightmare came without warning. Adelaide woke to find herself trapped in darkness, pinned down by weight and pain, Edmund's voice harsh in her ear. "Shut up, Adelaide. Stop your whining. You are my wife and you will do as I say." She could not breathe, could not move, could only lie there, as his fists found all the soft places that would not show beneath her clothes. The bruises bloomed like flowers across her ribs, her stomach, her thighs. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. "Adelaide!" The voice was different, rougher but kinder. And suddenly the weight was gone and she was sitting up in bed, gasping for air. Fletcher was in the doorway, his hair mussed from sleep and concern etched across his features. "You were screaming," he said quietly. "Are you all right?" Adelaide pressed her hands to her face, mortified. Her nightgown was damp with sweat, her heart racing so fast she thought it might burst from her chest. "I am sorry. I did not mean to wake you." Fletcher took a cautious step into the room, moving slowly as if approaching a spooked horse. "You do not need to apologize. Do you want to talk about it?" "No," Adelaide whispered. Then, because that felt too harsh, she added, "Not yet." Fletcher nodded, accepting this without argument. "Can I get you anything? Water? I could make some tea?" The kindness in his voice made Adelaide's eyes sting with tears. "Water would be good." He returned a few minutes later with a glass and a lit lamp, which he set on the bedside table. Adelaide drank gratefully, her hands trembling only slightly around the glass. Fletcher sat on the edge of the bed, careful to leave space between them. "I get nightmares too sometimes," he said quietly. "They are worse than the real thing in some ways because you cannot fight back against dreams." Adelaide looked at him, this man she had married but barely knew, and saw understanding in his eyes. He knew. He did not know the details, did not know about Edmund or Boston or the circumstances of her flight, but he knew about fear and pain and the way trauma carved itself into your bones. "How do you make them stop?" she asked. "I do not think they ever fully stop," Fletcher said honestly, "but they get less frequent with time, and it helps to remember that you survived whatever caused them. You are here now, and that means you were strong enough to get through it." Adelaide set the glass aside and wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "I do not feel very strong." "Strength is not about never being afraid," Fletcher said. "It is about being afraid and doing what you need to do anyway. You left wherever you came from. You traveled all the way here to start over. That took courage, Adelaide." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the scars on his face in the lamplight. She thought about the scars on his back, the ones he had not explained. She thought about the way he had given her space and time, had not demanded anything from her, had treated her with a respect she had not known she was allowed to expect. "Thank you," she whispered. Fletcher reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were gentle, barely brushing her skin. "Try to get some more sleep. I will leave the lamp burning if that helps." He stood to leave, but Adelaide's voice stopped him. "Fletcher, would you stay? Just until I fall asleep?" He turned back, surprise flickering across his face. Then he nodded and settled into the chair by the window, his long legs stretched out in front of him. "I will be right here." Adelaide lay back down, pulling the covers up to her chin. She watched Fletcher through half-closed eyes, the steady rise and fall of his chest, the way the lamplight cast shadows across his scarred face. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt safe. When she woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the window and Fletcher was gone. But the lamp on her bedside table was still burning, and Adelaide knew that he had kept his vigil through the night. Summer deepened into the full heat of July, and Adelaide found herself settling into life on the ranch with an ease that surprised her. She tended the vegetable garden Fletcher had planted behind the house, coaxed green beans and tomatoes and squash from the desert soil. She learned to make sourdough bread from a starter that Harriet Turner gave her, the yeasty smell filling the kitchen each morning. She mended Fletcher's shirts and darned his socks and washed their clothes in the big tub behind the house, hanging them to dry in the relentless sun. Fletcher worked from dawn to dusk, but he always came in for the midday meal, and they would sit together at the kitchen table and talk about small things. He told her about the horses he was training, a pair of yearlings with promising temperaments. She told him about the book she was reading, one of the few volumes in Fletcher's modest collection. They were learning each other, Adelaide realized, piecing together an understanding from these small daily exchanges. The nightmares came less frequently, though they still visited Adelaide on occasion. Each time Fletcher would appear in her doorway, would bring her water and stay until she fell back asleep. He never asked for details, never pressed her to explain. And Adelaide found herself trusting him more with each passing day. One evening in late July, they sat on the porch after dinner, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of pink and gold. Fletcher had his guitar, an instrument Adelaide had not known he owned, and he was picking out a simple melody that seemed to float on the warm evening air. "I did not know you played," Adelaide said. Fletcher's fingers stilled on the strings. "My mother taught me when I was young. I am not very good, but it helps sometimes when I need to think." "It is beautiful," Adelaide said honestly. "Will you play something else?" Fletcher began to play again, a slow, melancholy tune that made Adelaide's chest ache. She watched his hands move over the strings, calloused fingers coaxing music from the worn instrument, and felt something shift inside her. This man, this gentle, scarred cowboy who had married her sight unseen and asked for nothing in return, had somehow become important to her. The realization was terrifying. When the song ended, Adelaide found herself speaking without meaning to. "His name was Edmund Pierce. We were married for 6 months." Fletcher's hands stilled on the guitar. He did not look at her, did not move, just waited. "I thought he was charming," Adelaide continued, her voice steady despite the way her hands trembled in her lap. "He courted me after my parents died, said all the right things, made me feel like I was not alone anymore. I married him thinking he would take care of me." The words kept coming, a dam breaking after weeks of careful silence. She told him about Edmund's temper, the way it would explode over tiny things, a meal not cooked to his liking, a dress he thought too fine for a woman like her, her smile at another man on the street. She told him about the first time Edmund hit her, how he had cried and apologized and sworn it would never happen again. She told him about how it did happen again and again and again until she could not remember what it felt like to go a week without new bruises. "I planned my escape for 2 months," Adelaide said. "I saved every penny I could hide from him. I waited until he went on a business trip to New York, and then I took the money and left in the middle of the night. I saw your advertisement in the newspaper at the train station. I thought anywhere had to be better than where I was." She finally looked at Fletcher, expecting to see pity or disgust or any of the other reactions she had imagined. Instead, his eyes were blazing with a fury that was not directed at her. "If he ever comes here," Fletcher said, his voice low and dangerous, "he will regret it." "He does not know where I am," Adelaide said quickly. "I used a different name when I bought my train ticket. I was careful." "Good." Fletcher set the guitar aside and turned to face her fully. "Adelaide, I need you to understand something. What he did to you, that was not your fault. Nothing you could have done would have justified him hurting you. Nothing. Tears spilled down Adelaide's cheeks, hot and unexpected. I married him. I should have known better. Should have seen what he was before it was too late. No, Fletcher said firmly. He reached out and took her hands in his grip warm and steady. No, Adelaide, men like that, they hide what they are until you are trapped. You could not have known. And you did the bravest thing you could do. You left. You saved yourself. Adelaide squeezed his hands, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a world that had gone liquid and uncertain. I was so afraid when I came here. I thought maybe all men were like Edmund, that I had traded one prison for another. And now? Fletcher asked softly. Now I know you are nothing like him, Adelaide whispered. You are good, Fletcher. You are good and kind, and I do not know what I did to deserve finding you, but I am grateful for it. Fletcher's eyes searched her face, and Adelaide saw the exact moment when something shifted between them, when the careful distance they had maintained dissolved like morning mist. He lifted one hand to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away her tears with infinite gentleness. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. Adelaide's answer was to lean forward and close the distance between them herself. This kiss was nothing like the brief, perfunctory brush of lips at their wedding. This was slow and deep and thorough, Fletcher's mouth moving against hers with a tenderness that made her chest ache. His hands cradled her face like she was something precious, something worth cherishing. Adelaide's fingers found the front of his shirt, clutching the fabric as she kissed him back with all the pent-up longing she had not known she was carrying. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Fletcher rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted. Adelaide laughed, the sound shaky but genuine. "So have I." They sat together on the porch until the stars emerged, Fletcher's arm around Adelaide's shoulders and her head resting against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong, and for the first time since her parents died, Adelaide felt like she might actually have a home. That night, Adelaide moved her things into the main bedroom. Fletcher helped her carry her trunk, and when they stood together beside the big bed, he pulled her close and kissed her again, slow and sweet and full of promise. "Are you sure?" he asked against her lips. "We can still wait if you need more time." "I am sure," Adelaide whispered, and she was. This man, her husband, had shown her what it meant to be treated with respect and care. He had given her space to heal, had never demanded anything she was not ready to give. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted to build something real and good and lasting. Fletcher was gentle with her, his hands and mouth mapping her skin with reverence. When he saw the fading bruises that still lingered on her ribs and stomach, his jaw tightened, but he only bent to press soft kisses to each one, as if he could heal them with his touch. Adelaide wept, and did not know if the tears were from sorrow or joy or some combination of both. Afterward, they lay tangled together beneath the quilts, Adelaide's head on Fletcher's chest and his fingers drawing lazy patterns on her shoulder. Through the open window, a night breeze brought the scent of sage and desert flowers. "I should tell you about my scars," Fletcher said quietly. Adelaide tilted her head to look up at him. "Only if you want to." Fletcher was silent for a long moment, his hand stilling on her shoulder. Then he began to speak, his voice low and steady. "My father was a drunk. When he was sober, he was kind, but when he drank, he got mean. He would take his belt to me for any reason or no reason at all. My mother tried to stop him once, and he broke her arm. After that, she was too afraid to intervene. I learned to take the beatings and stay quiet because fighting back only made it worse." Adelaide's throat tightened. She reached up to trace the scar on Fletcher's face, the one that ran from temple to jaw. "He did this when I was 9, Fletcher said. Hit me with a bottle because I had forgotten to feed the chickens. When he died a year later, I was relieved. I know I'm supposed to mourn my father, but mostly I was just glad he could not hurt us anymore." "Oh, Fletcher," Adelaide whispered. "My mother never recovered from him," Fletcher continued. "She was like a ghost after he died, just going through the motions of living. When she passed 2 years later, I think it was because she was tired of trying. After that, I was on my own until Thomas Winters took me in." He looked down at Adelaide, his eyes shadowed but clear. "I told you all this because I want you to understand. I know what it is like to live with fear. I know what it is like when someone who is supposed to love you hurts you instead. And I swear to you, Adelaide, I will never be that kind of man. I will never raise a hand to you in anger. I will never make you afraid of me." Adelaide's tears soaked into his chest. "I know," she said. "I trust you, Fletcher. I do." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other. Two broken people who had somehow found wholeness together. August brought the monsoons, brief, violent storms that swept across the desert and left everything smelling clean and new. Adelaide stood on the porch during one such storm, watching lightning fork across the sky, and felt Fletcher come up behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist and pulled her back against his chest, his chin resting on top of her head. "Beautiful, is it not?" he murmured. "Terrifying and beautiful," Adelaide agreed, lacing her fingers with his where they rested against her stomach. "Like everything else about this place." Life settled into a new rhythm, one that felt more like a marriage in truth rather than just in name. Adelaide still attended the Thursday ladies' tea, where she had become genuine friends with Harriet Turner and several of the younger women. Fletcher still worked the ranch from dawn to dusk, but now he came home to a wife who waited for him with warm food and warmer kisses. They shared the big bed every night, and Adelaide marveled at how safe she felt in Fletcher's arms, how right it felt to wake beside him each morning. In September, a traveling preacher came through Wickenburg and held a revival meeting that half the town attended. Adelaide and Fletcher went together, standing in the crowd as the preacher spoke of redemption and second chances. Adelaide found herself thinking that she was living proof of second chances, that the life she was building here with Fletcher was something she had not dared to hope for when she fled Boston in the dark. After the service, as they walked back to their wagon, they encountered a man Adelaide did not recognize. He was tall and well-dressed, with the kind of polished appearance that spoke of money and education. He tipped his hat to them politely. "Excuse me," he said, his accent unmistakably from the East Coast. "I am looking for a woman, and I wonder if either of you might have seen her. Her name is Adelaide Pierce, and she may be using a different name. She is my wife, you see, and she ran away several months ago. I'm very worried about her." Adelaide's blood turned to ice. Edmund. It was Edmund, standing not 10 feet away from her, his eyes passing over her face without recognition because she had changed so much in the past months. The sun had browned her skin and brought out freckles across her nose. Her hair, which she had worn in tight curls in Boston, now hung in loose waves. Her dress was simple calico, nothing like the fine silks Edmund had insisted she wear. Fletcher's arm tightened around her waist, and Adelaide realized he had sensed her reaction even if he did not understand the cause. "Can you describe this woman?" Fletcher asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Dark hair, gray eyes, petite," Edmund said. "She is quite beautiful, or was before she became so difficult. She has some marks on her. Bruises from a fall she took. I am concerned she may not be thinking clearly." The casual way Edmund lied, the way he made her fleeing sound like confusion rather than survival, made Adelaide's stomach turn. Fletcher's hand moved to rest on the small of her back, a subtle gesture of support. "Have not seen anyone matching that description," Fletcher said, "but I will keep an eye out. Where are you staying if we hear anything?" "The hotel in town," Edmund said. "I would be very grateful for any information. There is a reward, of course, for anyone who helps me find her." Fletcher nodded once. "We will let you know if we hear anything." They walked away, Fletcher guiding Adelaide firmly toward their wagon. She could feel Edmund's eyes on her back, and it took everything she had not to run. Fletcher helped her up onto the seat with steady hands, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. They did not speak until they were well out of town, the lights of Wickenburg fading behind them. Then Fletcher pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to Adelaide. "That was him," he said. It was not a question. Adelaide nodded, unable to speak around the fear that had lodged in her throat like a stone. "He did not recognize you, Fletcher said, "and he is not going to find you. Do you understand me, Adelaide? I will not let him take you." "He is offering a reward," Adelaide whispered. "Someone might tell him about the new bride at the Walsh ranch. Someone might put it together." "Then we will deal with it," Fletcher said firmly. He took her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me. You are my wife. You are under my protection, and I will not let him hurt you again. I promise you that." Adelaide wanted to believe him, but fear had its claws in her now, sharp and unrelenting. "You do not know what he is capable of. He is smart, Fletcher. He is charming. He will make people believe whatever he wants them to believe." "And I am stubborn," Fletcher said, "and I'm not going to let him anywhere near you." He kissed her then, hard and possessive, and Adelaide clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a world that had gone spinning out of control. The next day Fletcher rode into town alone. Adelaide wanted to go with him, but he insisted she stay at the ranch where she would be safe. She spent the day pacing the house, jumping at every sound, her nerves stretched thin as wire. Fletcher returned as the sun was setting, accompanied by Sheriff Tom Brennan, a grizzled man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. They found Adelaide in the kitchen, where she had been attempting to cook dinner with hands that would not stop shaking. "Mrs. Walsh," Sheriff Brennan said, removing his hat respectfully, "your husband has told me about your situation. I want you to know that you have the law's protection here. If this man tries to approach you or your property, he will be arrested." Adelaide looked at Fletcher, confused. "But I am still legally married to Edmund. He has a right to me under the law." Sheriff Brennan's expression hardened. "You said he beat you, is that correct?" Adelaide nodded, her cheeks flushing with shame. "Then he broke the law," Sheriff Brennan said firmly. "A man does not have the right to abuse his wife, no matter what some might think. And even if the law was murky on that point, there is the matter of you being married to Mr. Walsh here. I have seen your marriage certificate. It is legal and binding, which means your marriage to this Pierce fellow is not valid." Adelaide's head spun. "But how is that possible? I was still married to Edmund when I married Fletcher." "You were married under duress," Sheriff Brennan explained. "A marriage is not valid if one party was coerced or in fear for their safety. Given what you have told me about the circumstances of your first marriage, any judge would rule it invalid. Your marriage to Mr. Walsh is the legal one." Hope flared in Adelaide's chest, so bright it hurt. "Are you certain?" "I am certain," Sheriff Brennan said. "And I've already paid a visit to Mr. Pierce at his hotel. I informed him that his wife is not in Wickenburg and that he should move along. I also informed him that if he bothers any of the citizens of this town, he will find himself in my jail. He was not pleased, but he agreed to leave on tomorrow's stage." Adelaide's knees went weak with relief. Fletcher was there immediately, his arm around her waist, holding her steady. "Thank you, Sheriff," he said. "Just doing my job," Sheriff Brennan replied, settling his hat back on his head. "Mrs. Walsh, you have friends here. If you need anything, you let us know. This is your home now, and we take care of our own." After the sheriff left, Adelaide turned to Fletcher, tears streaming down her face. "You did this! You went into town, and you made sure I was protected." "Of course I did," Fletcher said, as if there had never been any question. "You are my wife, Adelaide. I will always protect you." Adelaide kissed him fiercely, pouring all her gratitude and relief and love into the press of her lips against his. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Fletcher rested his forehead against hers. "He is leaving tomorrow," Fletcher said. "But I'm going to be in town when that stage pulls out just to make sure he is on it. Sheriff Brennan will be there too. We will make certain he is gone." "Can I come with you?" Adelaide asked. Fletcher hesitated. "Are you sure? You do not have to face him if you do not want to." "I want to," Adelaide said firmly. "I want to watch him leave. I want to know that he is really gone." The next morning they rode into Wickenburg together. Sheriff Brennan was already waiting near the stage depot, his expression grim. A small crowd had gathered, ostensibly to see off the stage, but really, Adelaide suspected, because word had spread about the situation, and people were curious. Edmund emerged from the hotel with his luggage, looking haggard and angry. His eyes swept the crowd and landed on Adelaide standing beside Fletcher. Recognition dawned, followed quickly by fury. "Adelaide," he said, starting toward her. "Adelaide, what are you doing? These people have been telling lies about me. You know I would never hurt you. Come back with me and we can forget all of this." Fletcher stepped in front of Adelaide, his body a wall between her and Edmund. "That is close enough," he said, his voice deadly quiet. Edmund stopped, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "She is my wife. You have no right to keep her from me." "She is not your wife," Sheriff Brennan interjected, moving to stand beside Fletcher. "She is Mrs. Fletcher Walsh, legally married and under the protection of the law. You need to get on that stage and leave town, Mr. Pierce, before I decide to arrest you for disturbing the peace." Edmund's face flushed red with anger. He looked past Fletcher to Adelaide, and she saw the calculation in his eyes, the way he was searching for weakness he could exploit. "Adelaide, please. I love you. I know I made mistakes, but I can change. Do not throw away our marriage for this cowboy." Adelaide stepped out from behind Fletcher, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "You never loved me, Edmund. You owned me, or tried to. You hurt me every day we were together, and you made me believe it was my fault. But it was not my fault. It was never my fault, and I am not going back to you. I have a real home now, with a real husband who treats me the way I deserve to be treated. You need to leave and never come back." Edmund's expression twisted into something ugly. "You will regret this. You think you can just run away and start over, but you cannot escape what you are. You are nothing, Adelaide. You were nothing when I found you, and you will always be nothing." Fletcher moved so fast Adelaide barely saw it. One moment he was standing beside her. The next he had Edmund by the front of his shirt, lifting him nearly off his feet. "You need to watch your mouth," Fletcher said, his voice like gravel. "That is my wife you are talking about, and I will not stand here and let you insult her. Now get on that stage before I forget that I'm trying to be a civilized man." Sheriff Brennan did not intervene, and Adelaide noticed several of the other men in the crowd had moved closer, their expressions making it clear whose side they were on. Edmund, perhaps realizing he was outnumbered, jerked away from Fletcher and grabbed his bags. "This is not over," he hissed at Adelaide. "Yes, it is," Adelaide said calmly. "Goodbye, Edmund." She watched as Edmund climbed onto the stage, watched as the driver cracked his whip and the horses lurched into motion. She watched until the stage disappeared in a cloud of dust, heading east toward the life she had left behind. Fletcher's hand found hers, warm and strong. "Are you all right?" Adelaide turned to him, and for the first time in months, maybe years, she felt truly free. "Yes," she said, "I am all right." They rode back to the ranch in comfortable silence, the morning sun warm on their shoulders. When they arrived home, Fletcher helped Adelaide down from the wagon and pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I am proud of you," he said against her hair. "You were so brave today." Adelaide pulled back to look at him, this man who had saved her in more ways than she could count. "I love you," she said, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess them. "I know we married as strangers, and I know this was supposed to be just an arrangement, but I love you, Fletcher Walsh. I love you so much it scares me." Fletcher's face broke into a smile so wide and genuine it transformed him. "I love you too, Adelaide. I think I have loved you since the day you stepped off that stage and tried to be brave, even though I could see how terrified you were. You are the strongest person I know, and I am honored to be your husband. He kissed her then deep and thorough, and Adelaide felt the last pieces of her broken heart finally knit back together. Fall arrived, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber. Adelaide's garden produced its final harvest of the season, and she spent long afternoons canning vegetables and making preserves that would see them through the winter. Fletcher brought in extra firewood and made repairs to the barn, preparing for the cold months ahead. One evening in late October, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Adelaide realized something was different. She had been tired lately more than usual, and certain smells made her nauseous. The realization, when it came, made her gasp aloud. "What is wrong?" Fletcher asked immediately, setting aside the bridle he had been mending. "I think I might be with child," Adelaide whispered. Fletcher stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he was across the room, pulling her into his arms and spinning her around, his laughter echoing off the walls. "Truly? You are sure?" "Not completely sure," Adelaide admitted, laughing despite herself. "But I think so. All the signs are there." Fletcher set her down gently, his hands cradling her face. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Adelaide asked, suddenly nervous. "Happy?" Fletcher repeated. "Adelaide, I am beyond happy. You have given me everything I never knew I wanted. A home that is truly a home. A wife I love more than anything. And now a child? I feel like the luckiest man alive." Adelaide's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears this time. "I never thought I would have this. A family, a real family. Edmund made me feel like I did not deserve happiness, like I was not worthy of being loved, but you have shown me that was a lie." "The biggest lie ever told," Fletcher said firmly. "You deserve everything good this world has to offer, and I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you have it." They confirmed Adelaide's pregnancy with the doctor in Wickenburg a week later. Dr. Martin was a jovial man in his 60s who had been delivering babies in Arizona territory for 30 years. He examined Adelaide thoroughly and pronounced her about 2 months along, with the baby due to arrive in late May. "Mrs. Walsh, you are healthy and strong," he said kindly. "I do not foresee any problems. Just rest when you need to, eat well, and come see me once a month so I can check on you and the baby." Adelaide floated out of the doctor's office on a cloud of joy. Fletcher had waited outside, pacing the street nervously, and when Adelaide gave him a confirming nod, he let out a whoop that turned heads all down the street. Harriet Turner threw Adelaide an informal celebration at the next ladies' tea, presenting her with a beautiful baby quilt the women had started working on as soon as word of the pregnancy spread. Adelaide was moved to tears by the gesture, by the way these women, who had been strangers 6 months ago, had welcomed her into their community. "You are one of us now, dear," Harriet said, patting Adelaide's hand. "This is your home." Winter came gently to the Arizona desert. Cool nights and mild days that were perfect for the slower pace Adelaide's pregnancy demanded. Fletcher was endlessly solicitous, bringing her tea in the mornings and rubbing her feet in the evenings when they swelled. He talked to her growing belly, telling their unborn child about the ranch and the horses and all the things they would do together. "What if it is a girl?" Adelaide asked one night, amused by Fletcher's assumption that the baby would want to ride horses and mend fences. "Then she will be the finest horsewoman in Arizona," Fletcher said without hesitation. "And I will teach her to be strong and brave, just like her mother." Adelaide's heart swelled with love for this man, her husband, her partner in building this new life. Christmas came, and they celebrated quietly at home, exchanging simple gifts. Fletcher gave Adelaide a rocking chair he had built himself, perfect for nursing the baby. Adelaide gave Fletcher a new shirt she had sewn, embroidered with his initials on the pocket. They ate roast chicken and sweet potatoes, and Fletcher played his guitar while Adelaide sang carols she remembered from childhood. "This is the best Christmas I have ever had," Fletcher said as they sat by the fire later that evening. Adelaide nestled against his side. "Mine too," Adelaide agreed. "Though last Christmas I never could have imagined any of this. I was so trapped, so hopeless. And now look at us." "Now look at us," Fletcher echoed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "A family." Winter gave way to spring, and Adelaide's belly grew round and full. She slowed down considerably in her last months, content to sit in her rocking chair on the porch and watch Fletcher work. He hired a young man named Jimmy Carson to help with the spring workload, recognizing that he would need extra hands once the baby came. In late May, on a warm evening when the sky was streaked with pink and gold, Adelaide's labor began. Fletcher rode into town to fetch Dr. Martin and Harriet Turner, his face pale with worry. By the time they arrived back at the ranch, Adelaide's contractions were coming strong and fast. "This one is in a hurry," Dr. Martin said cheerfully, washing his hands in the basin Harriet had prepared. "Mr. Walsh, I think you should wait outside." Fletcher looked torn, clearly unwilling to leave Adelaide, but also aware that this was how things were typically done. Adelaide reached for his hand. "Stay with me," she said, "please." Dr. Martin raised his eyebrows but did not object. "Very well, but you do as Mrs. Turner says and stay out of the way." Fletcher positioned himself at Adelaide's head, letting her squeeze his hand as hard as she needed while Harriet and the doctor worked. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Adelaide was certain she could not continue. But Fletcher was there, wiping her face with a cool cloth, whispering encouragement, reminding her that she was strong enough to do this. Finally, as the sun was rising on a new day, a baby's cry filled the room. "It is a boy," Dr. Martin announced, holding up a red-faced, squalling infant. "A fine, healthy boy." Harriet cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket before placing him in Adelaide's arms. Adelaide looked down at her son, at his tiny, perfect features, and the way his little fists waved in the air, and felt her heart expand to make room for a love she had not known was possible. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." Fletcher leaned over them both, his eyes suspiciously bright. "He is perfect," he said hoarsely. "Adelaide, he is absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas Fletcher Walsh, after the man who had given Fletcher a chance at a better life. Tommy, as they called him, was a content baby who rarely fussed and seemed to find endless fascination in watching the world around him. Fletcher was a devoted father, changing nappies and walking the floor with Tommy when he was restless, singing him the same lullabies his own mother had sung to him. Adelaide watched her husband with their son and marveled at how completely her life had changed. 2 years ago, she had been trapped in a nightmare, convinced she would never escape. Now she had a home, a husband who loved her, and a beautiful child. It seemed impossible, like something from a dream rather than reality. But it was real. The proof was in Fletcher's calloused hands gently cradling their son in the garden she had planted that was flourishing in the summer heat, in the way the ranch hands tipped their hats respectfully when they saw her. This was her life now, hard-won and precious beyond measure. The years that followed were full and busy. Tommy grew from an infant into a curious toddler who followed Fletcher everywhere, mimicking his father's walk and trying to help with the ranch chores. Adelaide's garden expanded, and she began selling her preserves at the general store in town, earning money that she carefully saved in a jar on the kitchen shelf. When Tommy was 3, Adelaide discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, maybe because she knew what to expect, or maybe because she was not carrying the weight of past trauma anymore. In the spring of 1886, she gave birth to a daughter they named Rose Harriet Walsh, after the flowers Adelaide loved and the woman who had befriended her when she first arrived in Arizona. Rose was a sunny child, all smiles and laughter, the perfect complement to her more serious older brother. Fletcher adored her, spending hours making her giggle by playing peekaboo or letting her ride on his shoulders. Adelaide watched her family grow and felt a contentment so deep it was almost frightening. One evening, when Tommy was 5 and Rose was 2, Adelaide and Fletcher sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard. Tommy was showing Rose how to identify different wildflowers. his small voice earnest and patient. Rose listened with rapt attention, her chubby hands reaching for each flower he pointed out. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Adelaide asked quietly. Fletcher was silent for a moment, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "I try not to," he admitted. "If I think about what your life was like before, about what mine was like, it makes me angry. But then I look at what we have now, and I think maybe all that pain was worth it because it brought us here." "I used to dream about this," Adelaide said. "When I was with Edmund, I would lie awake at night and imagine a different life, a husband who was kind, children, a home that felt safe. But I never really believed it could happen. I thought I was being foolish, hoping for something impossible." "It was not impossible," Fletcher said. "It was just hard to find. But we found each other, Adelaide. Against all odds, we found each other." Adelaide turned to kiss him, a soft press of lips that held years of love and partnership. "I am so glad I got on that stage, Coach," she whispered. "So am I," Fletcher replied. "So am I." As the sun set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Adelaide looked at her family and felt a peace that went bone deep. The marks Edmund had left on her body had long since faded, replaced by the stretch marks from carrying her children and the calluses from years of honest work. And the marks on her soul, the invisible scars that had seemed permanent, had healed too, slowly but surely, under the patient care of a man who had marks of his own and understood what it meant to survive. The years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and celebrations. Tommy grew tall and strong, helping Fletcher with the horses and showing a natural talent for working with animals. Rose grew into a sweet-natured girl who loved flowers and books and could charm anyone with her bright smile. Adelaide and Fletcher added a third child to their family in 1889, another boy they named Henry, after Fletcher's grandfather. The ranch prospered under Fletcher's careful management, and they were able to add more land and livestock. Adelaide's preserve business grew as well, and she eventually hired 2 of the younger women from town to help her during the busy harvest season. She was proud of her small enterprise, proud that she had built something with her own hands. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Fletcher surprised Adelaide with a trip to Prescott, the territorial capital. They left the children with Harriet Turner, who was now in her 70s but still spry and delighted to babysit. It was the first time Adelaide and Fletcher had been alone together since Henry's birth, and they made the most of it, staying in a hotel and eating in a proper restaurant and walking the streets hand in hand like young sweethearts. "I feel like I'm courting you all over again," Fletcher said as they strolled through the town square in the evening. "You never really courted me the first time," Adelaide pointed out, amused. "We were married the day I arrived." "Then I should make up for that oversight," Fletcher said. He stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Adelaide Walsh, you are the most remarkable woman I have ever known. You are strong and brave and kind and beautiful, and I fall more in love with you every single day. You have given me a life I never dreamed I could have, and I want you to know that I do not take any of it for granted, not one moment." Adelaide's eyes filled with tears. "Fletcher, I love you so much. You saved my life in every way a person can be saved. You showed me what real love looks like, what a real partnership is supposed to be. You are my best friend and my greatest blessing." Fletcher kissed her there in the middle of the square, not caring who might see. And Adelaide kissed him back, pouring a decade of love and gratitude into the press of her lips against his. When they returned home, the children rushed to greet them, and Adelaide scooped them up one by one, breathing in the sweet scent of their hair and marveling at how lucky she was. Fletcher caught her eye over Tommy's head and smiled, and Adelaide knew he was thinking the same thing. In 1892, Arizona was moving closer to statehood, and the changes were evident even in small towns like Wickenburg. The railroad came through, bringing new opportunities and new people. The wild frontier that Adelaide had arrived in 10 years ago was becoming more civilized, though it retained its rugged character. Tommy was now 13, already as tall as Adelaide and showing signs of becoming as tall as his father. He had Fletcher's steady temperament and Adelaide's quick mind, and both parents were proud of the young man he was becoming. Rose was 9, still sweet, but showing signs of the strong will she had inherited from both parents. Henry was 3, a ball of energy who kept everyone on their toes. One afternoon, as Adelaide was working in her garden with Rose's help, a familiar face appeared at the gate. Adelaide straightened, shading her eyes against the sun, and then let out a cry of delight. "Harriet!" Harriet Turner came through the gate, moving slowly but with a smile on her face. She was frailer than she had been, the years catching up with her, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. "Hello, dear. I hope you do not mind an unannounced visit?" "Never," Adelaide said, embracing the older woman carefully. "You are always welcome here. Come inside, and I will make tea." Over tea and fresh bread, Harriet told Adelaide that she was planning to retire from teaching at the end of the school year. "I'm getting too old for wrangling children all day," she said with a rueful smile. "But I have been thinking about who might take over the school, and I immediately thought of you, Adelaide." Adelaide nearly dropped her teacup. "Me? But Harriet, I am not a teacher." "You are educated, patient, and wonderful with children," Harriet countered, "and you have been helping Rose with her lessons at home. She is reading at a level well beyond her years. The town needs a new teacher, Adelaide, and I cannot think of anyone better suited for the position." Adelaide was stunned. She had never considered teaching, but the idea took root in her mind and began to grow. It would mean a steady income and the opportunity to help shape young minds. It would also mean being part of the community in a new way, contributing something important. "I need to discuss it with Fletcher," Adelaide said carefully. "But Harriet, I am honored that you would think of me." That evening, Adelaide told Fletcher about Harriet's offer. He listened carefully, his expression thoughtful. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I think I want to try," Adelaide admitted. "I love being a mother and taking care of our home, but I also miss having something that is just mine. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Fletcher said. "You have always been meant for more than just keeping house, Adelaide. If teaching is what you want to do, then you should do it. I will support you however I can." Adelaide took over the schoolhouse in Wickenburg in the fall of 1892, and she discovered that she loved teaching. The children responded to her patient methods and genuine care, and Adelaide found immense satisfaction in watching them learn and grow. She was particularly good with the students who struggled, perhaps because she understood what it was like to feel lost and need someone to believe in you. Fletcher was endlessly proud of her, and he made sure she knew it. He adjusted his schedule so he could be home when the children got out of school, and he took over more of the household chores without complaint. They were a team, partners in every sense of the word, and their marriage only grew stronger with time. In 1896, Adelaide stood at the window of the schoolhouse watching the children play during recess, and she thought about the girl she had been when she arrived in Wickenburg 14 years ago. That girl had been broken and afraid, convinced she had no value beyond what others assigned to her. That girl had marks she could not explain, bruises that mapped a history of violence and control. But that girl was gone now, replaced by a woman who knew her own worth. Adelaide had built a life she was proud of, had raised children who were kind and confident, had found work that fulfilled her, and had loved a man who had never once asked her to be anything other than herself. The marks were gone, the physical ones and the invisible ones too, or if not completely gone, then transformed into something else. Scars, yes, but scars that told a story of survival and strength. Scars that proved she had been through the fire and come out the other side, not unscathed but unbroken. Adelaide turned from the window to call the children back inside, and as she did, she caught sight of Fletcher riding into town. He had promised to meet her after school so they could shop for supplies together, and he was early as always, never wanting her to wait. He spotted her in the window and waved, his face breaking into that smile she loved so much. Adelaide waved back, her heart full to bursting. This was her life. This man, these children, this community, this work, All of it hard-won and all of it precious. She had fled from one life and found another, and in the process, she had discovered that she was so much stronger than she had ever known. The bell rang, and Adelaide's students filed back into the classroom chattering and laughing. As she began the afternoon's lessons, Adelaide felt Fletcher's presence outside, felt the solid certainty of his love like a hand at her back, steadying her, supporting her, reminding her that she was not alone. She had marks she could not explain when she arrived in Wickenburg, but Fletcher Walsh had never asked her to explain. He had simply loved her, scars and all, and taught her to love herself the same way. And that, Adelaide thought as she wrote the day's spelling words on the blackboard, was the greatest gift anyone had ever given her. The years continued their march forward, bringing changes both small and momentous. Tommy grew into a fine young man, taking over more and more of the ranch work from Fletcher. At 19, he married a sweet girl named Emma, the daughter of a neighboring rancher, and Fletcher built them a small house on the edge of the property. Adelaide watched her firstborn become a husband and then a father himself, and she marveled at the passage of time. Rose, always the dreamer, announced at 16 that she wanted to go to the normal school in Flagstaff to become a teacher like her mother. Adelaide and Fletcher were immensely proud, though Adelaide secretly cried for a week before Rose left, missing her daughter already. Henry, now 11, showed signs of wanting to be a veterinarian, spending all his free time caring for the ranch animals and reading every book about animal husbandry he could get his hands on. In 1899, Fletcher turned 45, and Adelaide threw him a surprise party with half the town in attendance. Fletcher was uncomfortable with all the attention, but deeply touched by the show of affection from the community he had helped build. Later that night, as they sat on their porch under a canopy of stars, Fletcher pulled Adelaide close. "Do you remember that first night?" he asked. "When you arrived and we were married and everything was so awkward and uncertain?" "I remember," Adelaide said softly. "I was so frightened. I did not know if I had made a terrible mistake." "I was frightened too," Fletcher admitted. "I had convinced myself that I did not need anyone, that I was fine alone. And then you stepped off that stage, and I looked at you, and I knew my life was about to change completely. I just did not know if it would be for better or worse." "And now?" Adelaide asked, though she knew the answer. "Now I know it was the best thing that ever happened to me," Fletcher said. "You made me believe in second chances, Adelaide. You made me believe that the scars we carry do not have to define us." Adelaide turned to kiss him, a kiss that held 17 years of partnership and love. "We saved each other," she whispered against his lips. "That is what I believe. We were both drowning in our own ways, and we found each other and learned to swim." They sat together on the porch until late into the night, talking about their children and their plans for the future and all the small, ordinary things that made up their extraordinary life together. And when they finally went to bed, Adelaide lay in Fletcher's arms and listened to the steady rhythm of his breathing and felt a gratitude so profound it brought tears to her eyes. She had marks she could not explain when she met Fletcher Walsh, and he had never asked her to explain. Instead, he had loved her through the healing, had given her the time and space to become whole again, and in doing so, he had become whole himself. The new century arrived with celebration and hope. Adelaide and Fletcher stood with their community on New Year's Eve 1900, watching fireworks light up the desert sky. Tommy and Emma stood nearby with their 2 children, a boy and a girl who called Adelaide and Fletcher Grandma and Grandpa. Rose was home from school for the holidays, regaling them with stories of her studies. Henry was growing like a weed, already taller than Adelaide and showing signs of eventually matching Fletcher's height. "A new century," Fletcher said, his arm around Adelaide's waist. "Who knows what it will bring?" "Whatever it brings, we will face it together," Adelaide replied, "just like we always have." And as the fireworks burst overhead, painting the night sky in brilliant colors, Adelaide thought about the journey that had brought her here. From Boston to Arizona, from terror to peace. From a woman with marks she could not explain to a woman who understood that those marks were part of her story, but not the whole of it. She had found love in the most unlikely place with a man who was scarred just like her, who understood without words what it meant to survive and heal. They had built something beautiful together, a life and a family and a legacy that would outlast them both. The mail-order bride had marks she could not explain, and the cowboy never asked her to explain. Instead, they had written a new story together, one of redemption and second chances and love that conquered all the darkness that had come before. And that story, Adelaide knew, would continue long after they were gone, in the children they had raised, and the community they had helped build, and the countless small kindnesses they had shown each other every day of their marriage. As the clock struck midnight and the new century began, Adelaide Walsh looked at her husband, her children, her grandchildren, and her friends, and she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The journey had been long and painful, but it had brought her home. And home, she had learned, was not a place but a feeling, a sense of belonging and safety and love. The marks had faded, replaced by laugh lines and the silver in her hair and the calluses on her hands from years of honest work. But more importantly, the marks on her soul had healed, transformed by the love of a good man and the life they had built together. And that, Adelaide thought, as Fletcher pulled her close and kissed her while their family cheered, was the happiest ending she could have ever imagined.